Before the stars start burning and the fleet start falling, do me a quick favor. If you enjoy sharp sci-fi where humanity punches above its weight, tap like, drop a comment with what you think an apex predator should never do, and subscribe so you do not miss the moment this galaxy changes forever. Now let's begin. Across 13 conquered systems, the same warning circulated in 1,000 languages. Do not attempt control. Do not attempt communication. Do not attempt survival. The creature the warlords called Carzel was not a myth, though legends clung to it like ash. It was flesh and bone and hunger, engineered by no one and claimed by nothing. Entire armadas had tried to collar it with gravity snares, psychic lattices, and obedience implants that bent lesser species into loyal weapons. Every method failed. Every failure ended the same way. Silence on the command channel, debris tumbling through vacuum, and a planet quietly added to the list of places no one would ever settle again. The Galactic Warlords Alliance did not rule through unity or justice. They ruled through proof. Proof that resistance was pointless. Proof that fear worked faster than diplomacy. Carzel was supposed to be their final proof, a living catastrophe chained and pointed at their enemies. Instead, it became the measure of their arrogance. Now it lived on Varkesh 9, a quarantined death world scarred by its passage. The planet's surface was a lattice of broken continents and scorched seas, shaped by claws that could split tectonic plates and a roar that collapsed orbital stations. Surveillance arrays ringed the system, watching but never approaching. The warlords had agreed on one thing. If they could not control the predator, they would at least contain it. Containment shattered the moment a small human vessel pierced the quarantine line. The ship barely registered as a threat. No escort. No weapons array worth cataloging. Its hull carried the dull scars of long travel and improvised repairs, the kind of craft used by scouts, couriers, or fools. In the observation halls of the Alliance, high-ranking commanders leaned closer to their displays, curiosity briefly overcoming disdain. Humans were a recent addition to galactic awareness. Loud, persistent, difficult to intimidate. They had no empire, no unified fleet, and no reverence for the established order. The warlords tolerated them because tolerance cost less than extermination, and because humans kept surviving outcomes that should have erased them. The human aboard the vessel identified himself with a single name. No titles. No bloodline. No ritual phrases of submission. Just a name and a request for surface clearance. The request was denied. The ship descended anyway. On Varkesh 9 the air was thick with metallic dust and the smell of burned stone. Storms rolled without pattern, driven by heat trapped beneath a fractured crust. The human disembarked alone, his boots crunching against ground that had never known agriculture or peace. He carried no visible weapon. No exosuit. Only layered survival gear and a pack slung across his back. His name was Elias Ward. Elias had grown up on a frontier world where predators still existed, not as stories but as neighbors. He had learned early that fear made noise and noise made you visible. When he walked, he did so with deliberate care, every step placed as if the ground might flinch beneath him. His eyes never stopped moving but his posture remained calm, loose, unthreatening. Far from him something vast shifted. Sensors in orbit spiked. Energy signatures rose and fell like a breathing mountain. The warlords recognized the signs immediately. Carzel was aware. Elias felt it before he saw it. The pressure in the air changed, heavy and expectant, like the moment before a storm breaks. He stopped walking and waited. Waiting was a skill one humans had refined over tens of thousands of years, often in the presence of teeth. The predator emerged from the haze in pieces at first. A horned silhouette. A mass of muscle armored in natural plating. Eyes like molten gold, fixed on the lone figure that had entered its territory without permission or fear loud enough to taste. The warlords expected a charge. They expected screaming. They expected the human to die quickly or painfully, preferably both. Elias did neither. He lowered himself to one knee, not in submission but in balance. His hands remained visible. His breathing slowed until it matched the rhythm of the wind scraping across the broken plain. He did not look away but he did not stare. On Earth that difference had mattered. Carzel halted. The distance between them remained vast, yet something in the air tightened, a thread pulled taut. The predator's head tilted as if assessing not prey, not enemy but anomaly. Its kind had been hunted, tortured, studied and used. Every other species had approached it with hunger for control or terror of annihilation. This one approached with neither. In the observation halls, murmurs rippled. Commands were issued and ignored. Weapons platforms tracked the scene, targeting solutions ready but unused. No one wanted to be the one who provoked the creature now that it was focused. Elias reached into his pack slowly and removed a small object, dull and unremarkable. He placed it on the ground between them and withdrew his hand. Meat, preserved and treated to mask the scent of fear. An offering, not a bribe. Carzel took a step forward. Stone cracked beneath its weight. The distance closed enough for Elias to feel the heat radiating from its body, enough to know that if he misjudged the next breath, there would be no second chance. He did not run. Above them, the warlords watched history hesitate, balanced on the edge of a choice none of them had ever imagined the predator capable of making. Carzel lowered its head just slightly and the galaxy held its breath. The warlords did not interrupt the feed. No one spoke. The predator's lowered head unsettled them more than any act of violence could have, because it suggested deliberation. Elias felt the ground tremble as Carzel advanced another step, then another, each movement precise enough to contradict every report ever written about it. The creature's breath rolled across him in slow, furnace-warm waves, carrying the scent of scorched minerals and something older, something that reminded Elias of storms breaking over dry land. His pulse quickened, but he kept his body loose, his weight centered. Fear could exist. Panic could not. The offering remained untouched. Carzel's gaze fixed on Elias's eyes, not his hands, not the pack, not the exposed throat. That alone told Elias more than any xenobiology briefing ever could. Predators that looked at the eyes were not hunting. They were deciding. In orbit, Commander Threx of the Veruan clade finally broke the silence. His mandibles clicked in agitation as he leaned closer to the display. He is not using any control mechanism. Scan again. The technicians complied, their voices tight as they reported the same result for the fourth time. No energy spikes. No pheromonal manipulation. No neural interference. Just a human standing far too close to the most lethal organism ever catalogued. Threx felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Uncertainty. On the surface, Elias slowly rose from his kneel, careful not to increase his apparent size too quickly. He took one step to the side, angling his body, offering space rather than challenge. His gaze drifted briefly to the ground, then returned to the predator's face. A gesture learned from wolves, from big cats, from things that killed when cornered but spared when respected. Carzel rumbled, a sound that vibrated through Elias's bones. It was not a roar. It was closer to a question. "I know," Elias said quietly, his voice almost lost to the wind. He did not expect the creature to understand words. Words were for people. Tone was for everything else. "I know what they did to you." The warlords recoiled at the sound of his voice, amplified through the feed. Speaking to it was forbidden, not because it provoked attacks but because it implied equality. The Alliance had spent decades ensuring the galaxy never made that mistake. Carzel's head dipped lower, close enough now that Elias could see the scars. Not the shallow marks of battle, but deep, uneven damage where restraints had burned into living armor, where tools had cut not to kill but to test limits. The creature's eyes narrowed, not in rage but in recognition of something long absent. Elias reached out, stopping well short of contact, his hand hovering in the heated air. His fingers trembled despite his control. This was the edge of his understanding, the moment where instinct could only guide so far. He waited again. The predator did not flinch. In orbit, the feed zoomed tighter. A junior warlord whispered a question no one else wanted to ask. Why hasn't it killed him? Threx did not answer because the answer forming in his mind was unacceptable. Elias withdrew his hand and stepped back half a pace. He did not push. Trust, he knew, was not taken. It was invited. Slowly, almost ceremonially, Carzel lowered its massive frame, forelimbs folding, head dipping until its horns scraped the stone. The movement was not submission. It was an offering of stillness. Elias exhaled. He circled the creature with deliberate care, keeping his movements predictable. Up close, Carzel was overwhelming, a convergence of muscle and ancient design, but it was also wounded in ways no scan could quantify. Elias stopped near the creature's shoulder, close enough now that heat seeped through his gloves. He did not touch it. Instead he sat down. The act sent a shockwave through the observation halls. Sitting in the presence of a dominant predator was not bravery. It was madness unless one understood the language being spoken. Elias leaned back slightly, resting his hands on the ground, exposing his torso without baring his throat. He made himself part of the landscape, not an intruder upon it. Minutes passed. Then more. Carzel shifted its weight, adjusting to match Elias's position, its breathing slowing until the rhythm synced with his. The bond, fragile and unspoken, took shape in that shared cadence. Not control. Not command. Coexistence. In orbit, systems began to alert as the Predator's energy output stabilized at levels never recorded before. It was calm. Not dormant, not restrained. Calm. Threx felt something cold settle in his core. Prepare contingency protocols, he ordered, though his voice lacked conviction. On the surface, Elias stood once more. This time, when he stepped closer, Carzel did not watch his eyes. It watched his balance. Elias placed a hand against the creature's armored hide, just for a moment. The surface was warm, rough, alive. He felt the subtle shift beneath his palm as muscle adjusted, not to strike, but to accommodate. The warlords erupted into overlapping demands and shouted analyses, but their words blurred together, stripped of meaning by the image unfolding before them. Elias climbed. He did not scramble or rush. He moved as if the path had always been there, stepping onto ridges formed by natural plating, using leverage instead of force. Carzel remained still, its immense body steady beneath him, until Elias settled between its shoulders, low and balanced, one hand resting lightly against the base of its neck. The Predator rose. The ground shook as it stood to full height, the human now unmistakably astride it, not as a conqueror, but as a presence accepted. Dust and ash swirled around them, framing a silhouette that would burn itself into galactic memory. In orbit, alarms went unanswered. On Varkesh 9, Elias looked out across the broken horizon, his heart hammering with awe and a fear sharpened into clarity. Below him, power waited, restrained not by chains but by choice. And above him, an entire galaxy watched, realizing far too late that they had misunderstood both the Predator and the species bold enough to meet it halfway. The feed from Varkesh 9 spread like wildfire across the Alliance's command networks. Dozens of warlords huddled in their chambers, eyes glued to the screens, jaws tight. The image of a lone human astride the galaxy's most feared predator was not something anyone had prepared for, and preparation was the one currency these rulers understood. Elias sat tall between the creature's shoulders, his hands resting lightly on its armored hide, as if gravity and instinct alone had woven a bridge between them. Carzel's movements were minimal, precise, almost cautious, as though the predator were testing the human's boundaries as carefully as he tested its own. There was no leash, no collar, no technology enforcing obedience, only the quiet, immovable trust born of experience and necessity. Commander Threx slammed a clawed hand against the control console, shattering a tablet under his grip. "Impossible," he growled. "This human he's controlling it without devices. Without strategy. How is he doing this?" A junior technician, trembling, whispered, "He's reading it. Communicating without words." "Preposterous," Threx said, though his voice had lost conviction. "Predators don't respond to humans. Not like this. Not without pain, not without domination, not without terror." Elias, unaware of the growing panic in orbit, leaned forward slightly, tilting his head in a gesture Carzel seemed to understand. The predator dipped its own massive head, breathing deep and even, the golden glow of its eyes catching the dying light of Varkesh 9's twin suns. Elias's voice cut softly through the wind, calm but firm. "You've been hunted. You've been broken. I see it." The creature's muscles tensed under him, but it did not strike. Instead, a low vibration emanated from its chest, almost a purr, almost a rumble of recognition. This was no submission. Submission would have been meaningless. This was choice. Far above, in the observation halls, the warlords exchanged frantic messages. Tactical overlays failed to interpret the situation. Weapons systems stayed idle, their algorithms failing to account for a human as the apex controller. Data analysts ran endless simulations, only to be met with results that contradicted centuries of military doctrine. A voice in the chamber, trembling, said, "Perhaps, the human is bonded. Not by force but by understanding." Threx spun toward the speaker, eyes flashing. "Understanding? Do you mean to tell me that a single human can dominate the predator through empathy?" "Yes," the voice admitted, and the sound of it alone caused the room to fall silent. Every calculated assumption of superiority, every strategy built on fear, every prediction of control, it all unraveled in that single affirmation. Elias shifted again, his hands brushing the ridges of Carzel's back, his posture relaxed but alert. In the predator's eyes, he read caution and curiosity, a primal intelligence that had witnessed countless attempts at domination and found them wanting. This creature had survived wars that had erased entire fleets. And now it was choosing to follow him. "Why does it obey him?" a junior officer demanded. Why hasn't it destroyed him already? A veteran strategist, usually calm under pressure, finally spoke. Because this human does not seek to destroy. He does not seek to command. He seeks only to coexist, and the predator recognizes the difference. On the ground, Elias tested the predator's movement. A slight lean to the left, a shift in weight distribution, and Carzel stepped smoothly, massive claws leaving deep impressions in the cracked stone. Elias guided with balance, not force, as if teaching and learning simultaneously. The predator responded, its immense frame moving with a harmony that no algorithm could replicate. The warlords' faces were pale across the command halls. In their experience, power had always been measured in domination, in fear, in the ability to bend reality to one's will. Humans were supposed to be clever, adaptable, yes, but never this. They were supposed to cower in the presence of true predators, to fail spectacularly when confronted by the raw apex forces of the galaxy. And yet here was Elias, defying every expectation, orchestrating movements without coercion, the predator's loyalty earned rather than enforced. Elias glanced toward the horizon, scanning the ruined landscapes of Varkesh 9. He noted the subtle shifts in wind, the faint tremors beneath the predator's feet, the way Carzel's muscles rippled under his touch. Every motion was a negotiation, every pause a conversation. He understood instinctively that dominance achieved through fear was temporary. True control, if it could even be called that, required understanding. Carzel rumbled low in response, and Elias spoke again softly, "We move together. Not because I force you, but because we choose to." The predator's massive head tilted, a gesture almost imperceptible but deliberate, and then it began to move, steps measured, deliberate, almost ceremonial. In the command halls, screens displayed readings of Carzel's energy output, muscle tension, heart rate. Analysts tried to interpret the predator's responses as variables, inputs, triggers, but nothing aligned. All calculations failed. They realized, in dawning horror, that the creature's behavior could not be reduced to data points. It was responding to something that defied empirical measurement, a bond forged in instinct and respect, not chains or fear. Threx slammed his claws on the table again. Prepare for engagement. Targeting systems, now. No weapons fired. No signals launched. Every sensor, every drone, every automated system hesitated, as if the predator itself blocked action. Elias and Carzel advanced across the scorched terrain, and the galaxy watched, powerless to intervene. The predator moved with fluid grace despite its size, each stride a demonstration of raw power channeled with purpose. Elias remained poised atop it, his silhouette framed by the twin suns, a symbol of audacity the warlords had not anticipated. They had expected annihilation or chaos. Instead, they witnessed mastery achieved without dominance. As the predator carried him further into the wasteland, Elias allowed himself a brief glance toward the horizon, toward the fleets and the eyes that watched him. He felt no fear, only awareness, a sharp clarity that came from knowing one was neither alone nor helpless. Carzel's massive frame beneath him was a partner, not a weapon, a reflection of a principle long forgotten by those who measured power solely through conquest. The warlords could only watch. Their greatest weapon, the apex predator that had destroyed armadas and shattered planets, now moved at the will of a human who demanded nothing but recognition of its intelligence. The galaxy trembled, not from the predator's steps, but from the revelation that humanity could achieve mastery in ways no species had anticipated. Elias guided Carzel up a ridge, their shadows stretching across broken valleys and shattered stone. The predator paused at the crest, its eyes scanning the horizon, ears flicking at distant sounds, senses attuned to threats both real and imagined. Elias tightened his grip slightly, speaking in the low, even tones that had earned him this unprecedented trust. In orbit, the warlord's data feed showed only a single truth: control had shifted. Not through weapons, not through fear, not through technology. Through understanding. And as Elias and Carzel disappeared into the haze of Varkesh 9's storm-laden plains, the warlords realized the galaxy had changed. They had not anticipated the measure of a human. They had not understood the predator's choice. And for the first time they felt the icy fingers of doubt, cold, invasive, and inescapable, grip their empires. History would remember this moment. And the galaxy, for all its arrogance, would never forget the name of the human who dared to sit atop the predator and move with it as an equal. The fleets in orbit around Varkesh 9 remained frozen, their weapons trained on a target that no longer conformed to any rule they understood. Elias and Carzel moved with a precision that defied expectation, crossing jagged terrain where no walker or hovercraft could follow without shattering under the pressure. Every stride of the predator was deliberate, each step carrying Elias farther from the reach of the warlord's arrogance. Carzel's massive shoulders shifted beneath him, muscles rolling like living steel under the human's steady hands. Elias had learned the predator's subtle cues, the twitch of a horn, the flex of a limb, the shift of weight on jagged stone. They were speaking a language older than empires, older than fleets, a language written in trust and choice rather than commands and fear. In the command halls, the warlords argued furiously. "We must attack now," one screamed, clawed hands slamming consoles. "They cannot be allowed to leave the surface. They are beyond your comprehension," Threx interrupted, voice sharp and cold. "All your fleets, all your orders, all your control systems mean nothing. Do you see now? They are not obeying because they cannot. They obey because the predator chooses." The room fell silent as the reality settled like ash. The most lethal weapon in the galaxy, trained to annihilate without hesitation, had accepted a human as its partner. No chains, no implants, no psychic collars, nothing had forced this cooperation. And in that choice, the warlords saw a truth that shook every assumption of power they had built their empires upon. Elias guided Carzel along the perimeter of a massive crater, the remnants of a failed orbital bombardment still smoking in jagged chunks of stone. The predator's massive claws left deep furrows in the scorched earth, yet it moved with a grace that suggested careful negotiation rather than reckless destruction. Elias leaned forward slightly, adjusting his balance with the knowledge that one misstep could mean both of them tumbling into a fissure hundreds of meters deep. Carzel did not flinch. The human's calm presence was more than mere courage. It was comprehension born of necessity. Elias understood survival not as domination, but as harmony, and the predator responded to that understanding with a loyalty forged not by fear, but by recognition. Every movement was a conversation, every pause a negotiation. The warlords' fleets, bristling with weapons and arrogance, could do nothing but watch as their supposed apex weapon moved with purpose dictated by a species they had never respected. "Prepare to engage anyway," one of the younger warlords insisted, her voice trembling as she activated targeting protocols. "If we fire, we will force compliance." Threx shook his head. "Compliance is irrelevant. They are beyond it. Every missile, every railgun, every strike you launch will only test the predator's patience. And make no mistake, its patience is infinite compared to yours." On the ground, Elias shifted slightly, prompting Carzel to step over jagged ruins with careful precision. The predator's eyes flicked to the horizon, scanning for threats, but always returning to the human atop its back. Elias spoke in low, even tones, the words carrying no command, no threat, only acknowledgement. The predator responded with a subtle shift of weight, an adjustment that allowed them to move as one without breaking the rhythm they had established. Every movement demonstrated a principle that the warlords could not grasp. Mastery was not achieved through domination, but through understanding and trust. Carzel had survived every attempt at control by recognizing intent, and Elias's intent was neither aggression nor submission, but coexistence. That difference, subtle yet absolute, unraveled centuries of galactic doctrine. Elias guided the predator to the edge of a plateau overlooking a series of deep ravines. Below, the winds whistled through fractured rock, and the echoes of the planet's violent storms carried warnings across the landscape. Elias adjusted his posture, leaning into the predator's rhythm, and Carzel shifted with him, moving in perfect tandem. To the warlords watching from orbit, it appeared almost impossible, an image that defied logic and calculation. "Why does it listen?" one officer finally asked aloud, voice barely a whisper. "It should be destroying him." A strategist, older than most present, spoke with grim clarity. "Because he does not demand. He does not punish. He does not fear. He is human and he understands what no one else has." Elias's eyes scanned the horizon, noting the subtle signs of unstable terrain. Carzel's ears twitched in response to the faintest vibration, anticipating a fissure before it widened. Elias nudged the predator with a gentle touch, prompting a shift that allowed them to navigate the treacherous landscape with ease. Every movement reinforced their bond. Every decision reinforced the lesson that trust, not fear, was the currency of survival. Above them, the warlords' fleets remained motionless, trapped by both hesitation and the realization that their assumptions were wrong. Their greatest weapon, the apex predator designed to annihilate, was now the vehicle of humanity's audacity. It responded only to Elias, and it did so with precision that no fleet could replicate. Elias adjusted his position, lowering his hand to rest lightly along Carzel's neck, feeling the subtle flex of muscle beneath. The Predator's eyes locked onto his molten gold meeting human green, and in that gaze was an unspoken acknowledgement. The human was not a master but a partner. Not a conqueror but a guide. From the observation halls, analysts and commanders scrambled for explanations, scanning every possible parameter, every hypothetical that could account for this anomaly. There were none. Every calculation failed. Every strategy collapsed. Humanity had achieved mastery not by breaking a creature, but by recognizing it. Carzel began to move again, stepping carefully along the rim of the plateau. Elias leaned into each motion, balancing, adjusting, moving in harmony with the Predator's immense form. They were an unspoken unit, a partnership forged in the crucible of trust and instinct, and the galaxy's armies could do nothing to interrupt it. Elias spoke quietly, not to command but to communicate. We move together. We protect, we survive, we respect. The Predator's rumble was soft, almost melodic, a response to tone rather than language. Every step reinforced the bond. Every pause reinforced the truth. The Predator's allegiance was earned, not taken. The Warlords realized, collectively and in horror, that their greatest weapon had chosen a new allegiance. And that allegiance was human. Not through fear, not through technology, not through domination, but through understanding. A species they had dismissed as insignificant had rewritten the rules of the galaxy without firing a shot. As Elias and Carzel disappeared into the storm-swept plains, their silhouettes framed by the dying light of the twin suns, the Warlords understood the stark reality. Control had shifted. The Predator no longer belonged to fleets or empires. Its loyalty had a single name. Its purpose had a single will. And humanity, for the first time, had claimed a measure of power no one in the galaxy had ever imagined. The fleets remained in orbit, motionless and impotent, as the image of a human astride the apex predator burned into memory. History had been rewritten, and the galaxy would never recover its assumptions about strength, fear, or dominance. From the edge of the plateau, Elias looked ahead, Carzel's form steady beneath him. The storm winds howled around them, carrying dust and ash, yet he felt nothing but clarity. They were moving together, and nothing in the galaxy could dictate the rules of this partnership. The Warlords had seen it, had understood too late, and now the consequences of that revelation would ripple across every star system that dared to measure humanity by its size rather than its ingenuity. Elias adjusted his grip slightly, feeling the Predator's subtle acknowledgement, and together they advanced into the unknown, unstoppable and untamed, a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it acted with insight instead of arrogance. The storm broke across Varkesh 9, winds tearing through jagged valleys and whipping ash into spiraling columns. Elias sat firm atop Carzel, the Predator's massive muscles coiling and releasing with effortless power beneath him. Every step resonated with the ground, every motion a silent testament to the bond that had formed between them. It was not a bond of control but of recognition, respect, and understanding. Elias had earned it through patience, intuition, and a willingness to see the Predator not as a weapon, but as a living being with its own will. Below the surface, deep fissures glowed faintly with molten rock, evidence of the planet's violent history. Elias had studied these signs even before approaching Carzel, anticipating movement and reading the terrain with an almost instinctive clarity. He was a scout, a survivor, and now a partner to a creature that had shattered entire fleets. Together they moved with purpose, navigating terrain that no human or machine could have crossed alone. In orbit, the Warlords' fleets had fallen silent. All attempts to assert dominance had failed. Missiles remained unlaunched, railguns untouched, fleets frozen by the realization that the Predator's loyalty was absolute, and it answered to a single human. Commander Threx, usually so composed, felt a cold clarity settle in his mind. This was no longer about fleets or weapons. This was about understanding what humanity could achieve when other species measured them incorrectly. Elias's thoughts were not on the Warlords or their empires. They had little relevance to the immediate moment. His focus was entirely on Carzel, the subtle shifts in muscle beneath his hands, the rhythm of breathing, the intelligence flickering in those molten eyes. He had learned that power was not demonstrated through dominance, but through harmony. That understanding had saved his life and earned him the respect of a predator that had never yielded to any force. The Predator paused at the edge of a cliff, wind tearing across jagged stone. Elias leaned forward slightly, feeling the Predator's massive shoulders tense and shift beneath him. Carzel's eyes scanned the horizon, noting the faint movement of distant storms, the tremors beneath unstable rock. In that gaze was an ancient intelligence, the kind that had survived eras of hunting and warfare. It recognized Elias not as prey, not as master, but as a partner worthy of trust. "Let's move," Elias whispered, voice low but firm. It was not a command. It was acknowledgement of their shared intent. The predator rumbled in response, muscles coiling and releasing as it advanced with cat-like precision. Dust and debris flew in their wake, yet every step was careful, deliberate, and purposeful. Together they were unstoppable, not because of force but because of mutual understanding. Below them, the ravine twisted and deepened, molten fissures glowing like veins in the broken planet. Elias adjusted his balance, leaning slightly, guiding Carzel's massive stride. The predator moved as though every motion were choreographed, a deadly ballet of power and precision. Elias's mind worked in tandem with the creature, calculating angles, anticipating shifts, harmonizing instinct with experience. High above, the warlords watched helplessly. Their fleets, their weapons, their centuries of calculated strategy meant nothing. Their greatest apex predator had chosen a single human over every empire, every machine, every weapon of war. It was a lesson they had never expected to learn, that humanity's strength lay not in brute force or technology, but in insight, adaptability, and the courage to meet power with understanding. Elias's voice rose slightly, calm and deliberate. "We move together. Always together." Carzel's response was instantaneous, a subtle adjustment in weight, a shift in posture, a low rumble that vibrated through the ground. The predator was listening. Not obeying. Not dominated. Listening. The cliff ended abruptly, a sheer drop into a glowing chasm. Elias's heart raced, but fear had long since been replaced by clarity. He had read the terrain, understood the predator's instincts, and anticipated the moment. Carzel hesitated, massive claws scratching the stone, eyes flicking to Elias as if seeking confirmation. Elias nodded subtly. The predator leapt. The world seemed to pause. Time stretched in that split second, wind screaming past, molten rock glowing beneath them, and the predator's enormous form cutting through space with lethal grace. Elias held on, balancing with a mastery that matched Carzel's power. They landed with precision, momentum absorbed in perfect harmony. Not a bone broken, not a misstep made. In orbit, alarms screamed as sensors detected massive kinetic displacement, but no weapon had fired. The fleets watched as their apex predator, the terror of a galaxy, carried a human unscathed across impossible terrain. The warlords realized with dawning horror that their greatest advantage had been rendered irrelevant. Their predator's allegiance had shifted irrevocably. Elias allowed himself a brief smile. The moment was not for arrogance, not for triumph, but for recognition. He had faced something that should have destroyed him and instead found a companion, a partner, a force beyond calculation. He had rewritten what it meant to wield power in a universe built on domination. Carzel paused at the next ridge, golden eyes scanning the horizon. Elias leaned forward, whispering again, and the predator lowered its head in acknowledgement. Every movement, every adjustment, every subtle exchange reinforced the unspoken bond between them. It was a union of instinct and intellect, of trust and understanding, forged in danger but perfected through harmony. The storm winds carried their silhouettes across the broken landscape, an image of improbable strength and audacity. Humanity, represented by one man, had achieved what fleets and empires could not. It had earned the allegiance of the galaxy's deadliest predator without threats, without force, without domination. From the observation halls, the warlords stared, pale and silent. They had measured humans by size, by fleet, by technology, and been proven catastrophically wrong. The galaxy had shifted, subtly yet irrevocably, because one human had dared to approach power without fear and without arrogance. Elias and Carzel continued forward, disappearing into the storm-swept plains, the ground shaking with every stride, the winds screaming their passage. And in that thunderous quiet, the predator's rumble merged with the human's heartbeat, a testament to a principle no empire had yet grasped. True power lies not in domination but in understanding. The storm closed around them, masking their path, concealing them from orbiting fleets. Yet the message had already been delivered. The galaxy would remember the day a human rode the apex predator, not as a conqueror but as a partner. The warlords had witnessed a new standard of mastery, one born of courage, insight, and respect, and they would never forget it. Elias leaned back, riding the predator with effortless balance, feeling the rhythm of its powerful stride beneath him. Ahead, the unknown stretched endlessly, but he no longer feared it. Together they were unstoppable. And in the heart of a universe built on fear and domination, A single truth now shone brighter than any fleet or weapon: humanity could achieve what no one had imagined. The predator growled softly, a sound both warning and affirmation. Elias responded with a calm, steady breath. They were a single force now, moving forward into the unknown, unchallenged, unbroken, and unbound. A human and the apex predator rewriting the rules of the galaxy one step at a time.